You probably imagine Victorian London as a place of foggy streets, candlelit windows, and carriages rolling over cobblestones at night. But if you were suddenly dropped there, right now, this very second, you'd realize something quickly. Surviving that city took more than luck. It took instinct, awareness, and a strange mix of courage and compromise. Life moved differently there, slower in some ways, and harshly fast in others. And although people didn't know it, they were living inside a world full of risks that hid in plain sight. You might think you could simply blend in, walk down the street, and pretend you belong. But Victorian London didn't work like that. The city read you before you ever read it. The streets could sense hesitation. People could smell uncertainty. And the environment itself, smoke-heavy, noisy, unpredictable, took a quiet pleasure in testing you. It pushed you, nudged you, squeezed your patience, and reminded you, again and again, that this place wasn't built for comfort. It was built for survival. You step into the story on a cold morning, the kind that feels like the air itself is slightly wet. Not rain, just the usual London dampness that sneaks under collars and cuffs, settling on your skin like an unwelcome guest. Fog hangs low, floating between lamps as if it has decided to stay for a while. Everything looks still, but nothing is truly still in Victorian London. Behind every closed door is noise. Behind every wall is something restless. Behind every quiet breath is someone trying to stay alive. And here you are, standing on a narrow street, just off Fleet Market, wrapped in a borrowed coat, and try not to shiver. You've just arrived, through a strange twist of fate that you still don't understand. And all you know is that you must stay unnoticed. At least for now. The world around you feels like a dream, but it smells all too real. Coal smoke, horse manure, damp wood, and the distant sweet scent of roasted chestnuts carried by the wind. You take a step forward, careful and slow. The stone beneath your boots is uneven. The buildings rise tall on both sides, leaning inward slightly, as if they're whispering secrets to each other about the people walking underneath. You can feel them watching you. Not with eyes, just with age. These structures have seen everyone who has ever passed. They know the difference between a local and a lost traveler. A woman selling ribbons pauses to glance at you. Her dress is worn, her hands red from the cold. She looks you over quickly, not with friendliness, but with calculation. People here have to judge fast. They don't mean harm. They simply can't afford to ignore the wrong person. You offer a small nod, hoping it doesn't look strange. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't frown either. She simply returns to arranging her ribbons, and you take that as a small victory. You keep walking, try to appear confident even though everything inside you feels uncertain. You didn't choose to be here, though you haven't fully pieced together how it happened. All you remember is falling asleep while reading about Victorian life, something about survival tips people rarely talk about, and then waking up here in the middle of it all. Real or dream, you don't know yet, but your heartbeat feels real. The breath in your lungs feels real, and the cold biting your fingertips definitely feels real. The early morning crowd begins to thicken. People brush past each other with practiced indifference. A coach rattles down the street, wheels splashing through a puddle. A boy, barely 10, runs by with a bundle of newspapers under his arm. A chimney sweep coughs into a handkerchief as black dust releases into the air, and the bells of St. Paul's cry out in the distance, echoing across rooftops like a reminder that the city never truly sleeps. You soon notice that people move with purpose. Not one of them drifts aimlessly. In Victorian London, wandering can be misunderstood. It can make you look suspicious, or worse, vulnerable. So you pick a direction and follow it, pretending it's exactly where you meant to go. You pass by a bakery where warm bread scents the air. A queue is already formed outside, each person waiting patiently, hands tucked under arms for warmth. A thin man at the back of the line looks at you, then at the coat you're wearing. It's a small glance, but enough to make you quicken your pace. You don't know the customs here, and you don't know the dangers either. That alone makes you stand out. A few blocks later, you reach a wider street. More people, more noise, more movement. Horses pull carts filled with vegetables, barrels, fabrics, everything the city needs to keep moving. Street sweepers push away last night's mess. Vendors shout prices over each other. And from somewhere nearby, a musician plays a soft tune on a violin, barely audible over the chaos. But it's not the music that draws your attention. It's the man standing near the corner. He watches you as though he has been waiting for you to appear. He's not dressed like the others. His coat is longer, darker, and cleaner. His boots polished. His stare steady. He doesn't move, not even slightly, but something about his presence feels intentional, as though he has been observing your every step since you arrived. You try not to look nervous, but your stomach tightens. You turn toward a group of nearby market stalls, pretending to browse. The man doesn't follow, but he doesn't disappear either. You can still feel his gaze. Heavy, sharp, curious. You pick up a small wooden comb from a merchant's table. The vendor, a cheerful woman with freckles and a worn shawl, smiles at you. You buying or just touching? She asks lightly. Just looking, you say, hoping your voice sounds normal. First time here? She replies, collecting coins from another customer. You freeze for a second. Did she mean first time in her stall? Or first time in the city? Before you can answer, she leans in a little closer. Keep your head low, she murmurs. You've got the look of someone who doesn't want trouble. And trouble comes fast in this part of town. Your heart kicks against your ribs. She straightens and returns to her usual tone, greeting another person as though she didn't whisper a warning to a stranger seconds ago. You thank her quietly and step away from the stall. The man on the corner is gone, but somehow that feels worse. You continue down the street, blending with the growing crowd, your mind racing. If this place is real, if you truly are in Victorian London, you need a plan. You need information. And you need someone who knows how to survive without drawing attention. The city seems to hear your thoughts. A whistle blows sharply behind you, and two constables stride past, their batons clinking at their sides. They don't look at you, but their seriousness adds weight to the air. Law here works differently. Justice works differently. One wrong move can lead to consequences that echo for years. You slip into a narrow alleyway, hoping for a moment to think. But Victorian alleyways are never empty. A young woman with ink-stained fingers sits on a crate, writing something on a small sheet of paper. She looks up as you pass and studies your face. Her eyes are sharp, observant, too observant. You're new, she says simply. You stop. There's no point pretending. Is it that obvious? You walk like someone waiting for a sign, she replies. Locals don't wait for signs. They make them. Otherwise, the city swallows them whole. Her words are unsettling, but her tone isn't threatening. She gestures to the paper in her hand. I write what people forget, she says. Stories, parts of stories, memories, sometimes warnings. Want to hear one? You hesitate, feeling the weight of the moment. But something in her voice feels calm, almost trustworthy. Go on, you say. She sets the paper down gently. The number one rule to survive Victorian London, she says, is knowing when someone has noticed you. And someone noticed you today. Someone important. Your skin prickles. Ooh, you whisper. She shakes her head slowly. I don't know yet, but I know eyes when I see them. And his are the kind that don't watch for curiosity. They watch for purpose. You swallow hard. What should I do? She thinks for a moment, lips pursed. Don't run. Running is loud, even when your feet make no sound. But don't stand still either. Stillness is a signal here. Keep moving. Keep acting like you belong. And whatever you do, don't go back toward Fleet Market. What? Before she can answer, a loud bang erupts from the main street. The crash of a cart tipping over, followed by shouts. People start rushing past the entrance of the alley. The girl stands immediately, her expression shifting. That's your cue, she says. Go. Blend in. You'll understand more soon. Wait, you say quickly. Who are you? She gives a small smile. Someone who survived long enough to learn the rules. You want to ask more? But she waves you away, urging you to step back onto the street. You follow her advice, walking into the flow of people, letting the tide of movement carry you. Your mind spins with questions. Who noticed you? Why? What rule did you already break without knowing? As you merge with the crowd, you glance over your shoulder toward the alley. The girl is gone, not walking away, just vanished, as though the city swallowed her words the moment she spoke them. You continue forward, and then you feel it. That same heavy gaze. Somewhere close. Watching. Waiting. And this time, when you look across the street, you see a second man. Different coat. Different face. Same unnerving stillness. He's not alone. Another figure stands farther back, half hidden behind a wagon, and another near a lamppost. They aren't together, but they are connected. You can sense it. They all have the same expression. Like they recognize you. Like they've been expecting you. The girl's warning repeats in your mind. Someone noticed you today. Someone important. Your breath tightens. The street feels smaller. The fog feels thicker. And the city that once seemed busy and now feels like it's quietly closing its hand around you. You know one thing for certain. Whatever is coming, it has already begun. And Victorian London is not going to let you go easily. You move with the crowd, letting their pace become your pace. Try not to turn your head too sharply or too often. Your instinct tells you to look back at the figures who seem to be watching you, but you force yourself to resist. The girl in the alley was right. Stillness would give you away, but panic would be even louder. So you breathe, steadying yourself as best you can, hoping your nerves don't betray you. The street opens wider ahead, leading into a bustling market square. Vendors set up their stands under canvas awnings, tying ropes, lifting crates, arranging goods with the precision of people who've done this every day of their lives. Children dart between stalls, laughing and shouting. A dog barks near a butcher's table. Somewhere in the crowd, someone begins to sing, a soft, wavering tune that floats above the noise like a warm breath in cold air. You let the environment wrap around you. It helps disguise your tension, but the uneasy feeling never leaves. You step past a spice stall, the air bursting with the sharp scent of pepper and cinnamon. Then past a fishmonger, where fresh catches rest on beds of melting ice. A woman selling ribbons hums as she arranges her colorful loops. Life moves on around you. Lively, ordinary, almost comforting. Almost. Because even here, surrounded by noise and color and motion, you can feel something threading its way through the crowd. Something cold. Something aware of you. You slip into a row of shops on the far side of the market, ducking under a wooden archway worn smooth with age. You don't look back, but you can feel the watchers spreading out. They're not chasing you. Not yet. They're following at a distance, like wolves checking the pace of their prey. You try to think. What do they want? How could they possibly know you don't belong? Victorian London had strangers passing through constantly. Sailors, travelers, merchants, laborers. A new face should barely matter. Unless it mattered for a reason you haven't understood yet. You take a turn down a quieter street, hoping for a moment of space to process everything. This lane is different from the others. Narrower, dimmer, tucked between tall brick buildings that block most of the morning light. Laundry hangs overhead, draped from one window to another like a line of pale ghosts. The air here feels colder. You keep walking until you hear the sound of footsteps behind you. Slow, even, purposeful. Your body stiffens. You quicken your pace, but not by much. Too fast would be suspicious. Too slow would be foolish. You walk as though you're simply heading somewhere you've been many times before. The footsteps grow slightly louder. You turn left into a tiny courtyard tucked between buildings. A stone fountain sits at the center, cracked and dry. A pair of elderly women sit on a bench nearby, knitting quietly, not noticing you. Or perhaps choosing not to notice. People here are skilled at minding their own business, especially when something feels off. You cross the courtyard and slip into another alley that splits into two paths. You pick the right one by instinct alone, hoping it leads to a busier street. Just before you reach the exit, a hand catches your sleeve. You jolt, but the grip isn't harsh, it's urgent. A man in a brown coat stands in the shadowed corner. His face is tired, marked by years of living in a city that rarely gives people rest. His eyes, however, are alert, too alert. Don't turn around, he whispers. You freeze. Why? They're behind you, he mutters. Two of them. They've been tracking your steps since Fleet Market. Your breath catches. Who are they? He shakes his head. Doesn't matter. What matters is you can't let them corner you. These alleys twist back into dead ends. You pause for even a second, and you'll find yourself trapped. You swallow hard. Why are they following me? He gives a short, humorless laugh. People don't follow strangers here unless they think there's something worth finding. But I don't have anything. Maybe you don't, he says, but they think you do. Or they think you are something. His choice of words chills you. You try to pull your sleeve free, but he holds you firmly, not painfully, just enough to keep you from darting into danger. Listen carefully, he says. You knew. That much is obvious. Even if you fooled some people, you didn't fool the wrong ones. They're patient. They've been watching you all morning. So you need to stop pretending you can blend in on your own. What do I do? He gestures toward a door just ahead. It's old, wooden, faded, reinforced by iron nails. It looks like it leads to nothing more than storage. Go inside, he instructs. There's a passage. Follow it straight until you hear water. Don't turn left. Don't turn right. And don't stop. Why? Because if you go any other way, he says quietly, you won't come out where you're supposed to. Your pulse races. Why help me? He gives a slow exhale. Because someone helped me once. And I know what it looks like when the city chooses a person to swallow. Before you can ask more, the footsteps behind you grow louder. The watchers are close. The man releases your sleeve. Go, he whispers sharply. You don't think. You don't hesitate. You push open the wooden door and step inside. The room is pitch black at first, a wave of darkness swallowing the world behind you. The door closes quietly, as if it's been doing this for years. You stand still, letting your eyes adjust. Slowly, faint outlines appear. A narrow corridor stretches ahead, lit only by slivers of light that leak through cracks in the walls. You start walking, your footsteps soft on the wooden floorboards. Each sound seems louder in the silence. Your breathing echoes faintly. The corridor extends farther than you expected, winding gently but never splitting. The air inside smells damp, like stone and dust that hasn't been disturbed in a long time. After a while, you begin to hear it, the distant sound of flowing water, soft at first, then gradually growing clearer as you move forward. The man's instructions repeat in your mind. Don't stop. Don't turn. Don't question. You keep going. The water sound becomes louder. You feel a faint breeze. Then, suddenly, the corridor opens into a small underground chamber. A stream flows through it, shallow but steady, running beneath a wide arch in the stone. You step toward it cautiously. The air here feels different, cooler, cleaner, almost peaceful. For a moment, it's easy to forget the eyes watching you above the ground. Easy to forget the city that seems to be closing in. Easy to forget that you don't belong here and that everyone you've met senses it. You kneel near the stream, dipping your fingers into the water. It's freezing cold, but refreshing. You take a deep breath and close your eyes, trying to calm yourself. But then, another sound. Footsteps. Behind you. Inside the tunnel. Someone else has entered. You open your eyes instantly, heart pounding. You stand, turning toward the dark corridor. The footsteps are slow, steady, growing louder with each second. Maybe it's the man in the brown coat. Or maybe it's not. A voice echoes softly through the passage. Found you. Your stomach drops. It's not the man who helped you. It's one of the watchers. You step back instinctively, and your heel nearly slips on the wet stone near the stream. The chamber feels smaller now, the air heavier. You look around desperately for another exit, but the only path is the arch where the stream flows out. The watcher steps into view, tall, expression unreadable, eyes fixed on you with unsettling calm. There's no need to run, he says gently, almost kindly. We just need to talk. You don't trust the softness in his voice. Something in the way he stands, too still, too poised, tells you he didn't follow you here for a conversation. You edge toward the stream. Don't, he warns, taking one step forward. You take another step back, the water now rushing around your ankles. You don't know what's waiting for you if you go that way, he says. Maybe I don't. You answer, voice trembling. But I know what's waiting for me here. He reaches a hand toward you, palm open. Come with me. It's safer. Safer. The word sounds wrong coming from him. Safe is not what he represents. You take one final step into the stream. The water deepens quickly. The watcher lunges forward. You turn and let the current pull you into the darkness beneath the arch. You don't know where the water leads. You don't know what's waiting. But you know one thing. Victorian London isn't done with you yet. And something in this city wants you badly enough to chase you into the depths. The water pulls you forward faster than you expect. Cold rushes around your legs, then your waist, then your chest. You try to steady yourself against the slippery stone walls, but the current is stronger here, forcing you into a half-run, half-stumble through the darkness. For a moment, you can still hear the watcher shouting behind you, his voice echoing through the chamber. But within seconds, the sound fades, swallowed by the tunnel's twisting shape and the roar of water. Your fingers brush along the wall as you move, desperate to keep your balance. The stone feels uneven and rough, worn down by years of flowing water. Every few steps, the ground dips or rises unexpectedly, sending a jolt of fear through you. You can't see anything beyond vague shadows, shapes shifting around you like living things. But you keep moving. You have to. The cold becomes sharper the farther you go, sinking deep into your bones. You grit your teeth against the shiver creeping up your spine. Victorian London isn't exactly known for its warmth, especially not underground, but this chill feels different, heavier, almost like it's watching you too. Eventually, the tunnel begins to widen. You hear the echo of the stream ahead as it splashes into a larger body of water. The air shifts, still cold, but now tinged with a strange scent. Metal, oil, smoke. You slow your pace, unsure if the ground might suddenly drop beneath you. Then, as you round a gentle bend, you see it, a faint glow, flickering like candlelight. Not bright enough to be a lantern, not steady enough to be a lamp. You take a cautious step forward, water swirling around your calves. The glow becomes clearer, bouncing off the walls in soft gold waves. You squint, realizing it reflects off something moving, something turning. A wheel, then another, then gears. The glow comes from a massive iron structure embedded into the stone, spinning slowly as water rushes past its base. It looks like some kind of abandoned water-powered machine, a relic of early Victorian engineering. Pipes run along the walls, disappearing into the darkness. Some leak thin streams of water. Others hiss faint steam. You stare in awe. Victorian London was full of inventions and half-finished experiments, but finding one underground, still moving, is something else entirely. A low hum vibrates through the chamber. It's steady, rhythmic, almost calming, if not for the fact that you have no idea what the machine does or why it's still working. You take a few steps closer. The air is warmer here, heated by the machine's inner workings. The steam rises in soft bursts, wrapping around your hands when you reach out. Then you hear it, a whisper, not a voice, not exactly, more like a soft scrape, like something shifting behind the machine. You freeze. The whisper comes again, longer this time. A gentle swish, like fabric brushing stone. You back up a step, instinct screaming that you're not alone. Hello, you say before you can stop yourself. The whisper stops. Silence. Then, a soft click, like a latch releasing. A panel on the machine's far side slides open, revealing a narrow passageway lit by dim, amber lamps. For a moment, you wonder if you're imagining it. Victorian machines weren't known for secret doors. At least, not ones that still functioned after decades in the dark. You edge closer, squinting into the opening. The passage beyond is clean. Too clean. No dust. No crumbling stone. No signs of rats or dampness. It feels unnatural, like stepping from one world into another. A hand grips your shoulder. You gasp and spin around, but before you can speak, the person steps into the faint light. It's the man in the brown coat, the one who helped you earlier. Don't go in there, he says. His voice is calm but urgent. His face looks even more strained now, like he's been running or searching for you. Why not? You ask, heart pounding. The watcher was right behind me. This is the only exit. There are exits, he says, but that's not one you want. Your eyes dart back to the glowing corridor. Where does it lead? He shakes his head. Not to a place someone like you should be. Someone like you. Again, that strange phrase. What does that mean, you demand? Everyone keeps acting like I'm different, like they can tell something about me. He studies you for a long moment. The flickering light casts shadows across his worn features. You walk wrong, he finally says. You blink. Walk wrong. You look around too much. You stand too straight. You breathe like someone who hasn't spent their whole life in smoke and soot. His eyes narrow slightly. And you listen. Really listen. Is that unusual? Here. He huffs a tired laugh. It's practically a confession. You absorb his words slowly. You knew you stood out, but not in ways so simple, so human. Victorian London was full of people who fought every day just to get by. People who didn't waste breath on wonder or curiosity. Your reactions, your instincts, everything about you must look out of place here. He steps closer, lowering his voice. The people following you, they're not guards. They're not thieves. There's something worse. Your skin prickles. What are they? They're collectors. You swallow. Collectors of what? His jaw tightens. People who don't belong. Your breath catches. You mean to people like me? People like you, he confirms quietly. People who fall through the cracks of this city. People who see too much or ask the wrong questions. He glances at the machine again, the gears turning steadily. They would have expected you to take the waterway. They know these tunnels better than anyone. But this, he nods to the glowing corridor. This is something they fear. And if they fear it, so should you. Then why does it look so inviting? Because that's how it works. You stare at him, confused and uneasy. The machine hums behind you like a heartbeat with metal lungs. Come on, he says, gesturing back toward the darkness. I know another way out, but we have to move before. The machine lets out a sudden, shuddering groan. The ground trembles beneath your feet. Steam bursts from one of the pipes, spraying a violent cloud across the chamber. The man curses under his breath. It's waking up. We need to go. Now. But before either of you can move, the glowing corridor flickers brighter, too bright. The warm amber transforms into a stark white glare that spills across the chamber floor like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. You shield your eyes. The man grabs your arm. Something in the corridor moves. A silhouette. Tall. Still. Waiting. The man pulls harder, panic rising in his voice. Don't look at it. Come with me. But your feet feel rooted to the spot. The silhouette doesn't step forward. It doesn't speak. It simply stands there, framed by the blinding light, as though it has all the time in the world. Move, the man shouts. You tear your gaze away and stumble after him. He leads you toward another narrow tunnel on the opposite side of the chamber, one you hadn't seen before, nearly hidden behind a large cluster of pipes. Behind you, the light pulses once, twice. Then the silhouette steps forward. Its shadow stretches long across the chamber floor. The man grips your wrist tightly. Don't look back, he orders. You don't. You run. The tunnel ahead narrows again, swallowing the sound of the machine behind you. Your footsteps echo wildly, your heart pounding loud enough to drown out your thoughts. The man doesn't slow down. He pulls you through twist after twist, deeper into the maze of underground pathways. The air grows colder again, the walls damp with moisture. You don't know where he's leading you, only that he seems to know exactly where to go. Only when the sounds behind you fade completely does he finally stop. He leans against the wall, breathing hard, eyes closed. You grip your knees, trying to steady your shaking breath. What was that? You ask quietly. He opens his eyes. The reason, he says, voice strained, you can't trust this city. You try to speak, but his expression stops you. He looks terrified, really terrified. And then he adds, barely above a whisper, and now it knows you're here. For a long moment, neither of you says anything. The silence hangs heavy between you, broken only by the distant drip of water echoing through the stone tunnels. You're still trying to steady your breath, but your heart won't slow down. It keeps pounding, loud and uneven, like it still expects that glaring white light to spill into this passage and swallow you whole. The man runs a hand through his damp hair and straightens. His coat hangs off one shoulder now, torn where the water must have dragged against it. He looks older than he did before, tired in a way that seems deeper than exhaustion. It knows I'm here, You repeat softly. He nods once. It never ignores someone who sees it. And you saw it. I didn't mean to, you say, your voice barely above a whisper. I didn't even understand what I was looking at. That doesn't matter. Curiosity is enough. You lean back against the cold stone, trying to piece together your thoughts. Victorian London was supposed to be busy, gritty, overcrowded, a place where people hustled through life without looking back. You expected foggy streets, crowded markets, smoke-filled alleys. You didn't expect tunnels full of strange machines and corridors that glow like something from a dream. You didn't expect shadows that behave like they have a mind of their own. What was that corridor? You ask. The man exhales slowly. Something old. Older than this city. Older than anything built by the people who walk above us. That doesn't make sense, you say, though part of you knows it does. You felt something in that light. Something ancient, watching, waiting. It's not meant to make sense, he replies quietly. All you need to understand right now is that there are places in this city you don't walk into. And that was one of them. You look at him carefully. The dim light flickers across his face, revealing the strain in his jaw. He's frightened. Not for himself, you realize, but for you. Why are you helping me? You ask. His expression shifts slightly, just enough for you to notice. Because someone once helped me, he says. That isn't the answer you expected. You open your mouth to speak, but he shakes his head. Not here, he murmurs. We need to keep moving. If the collectors are looking for you, they'll search every tunnel that leads out of that chamber. They know the routes better than anyone. You swallow. Who are they, really? People who work for someone who doesn't want strangers wandering through their city. But I'm not a stranger. You are, he interrupts gently. You move differently. You speak differently. You notice things most people here would ignore. That's enough. He motions for you to follow him. His steps are slower now, more cautious. You keep close behind, one hand sliding along the wall to steady yourself. The passage here is narrow, barely wide enough for two people to stand side by side. You can hear the faint rumble of the city above, carts rolling, footsteps clattering, distant voices muffled by layers of stone. Why are these tunnels even here? You ask as you walk. They seem endless. They are endless, he replies. Victorian London keeps building up, expanding, piling new streets on top of old ones. But the older layers don't disappear. They sink deeper. They rot. They twist. People forget them, but the city remembers. So these are just older streets? Some, he says. Some are sewers. Some are abandoned work sites. Some are rail passages no one finished. And some, he pauses, some are never meant to be used by ordinary people at all. You feel a chill creep up your spine. He doesn't explain further, and you don't push. The darkness around you feels too close, too attentive. As you walk, the tunnel begins to slope upward. The air shifts again, less damp now, warmer, carrying the faint smell of coal smoke and something metallic. The man slows, listening to the sounds ahead. We're close, he whispers. Just stay quiet. You follow him through another bend and step into a wider tunnel supported by wooden beams. The ceiling drips with soot, and scattered piles of old tools lie abandoned along the walls. Lantern hooks hang empty overhead, their chains swaying gently in the draft. Where are we now? You ask. Under Clerkenwell, he answers. A place where the past never learned how to stay buried. You're about to ask what he means when he freezes suddenly and holds out a hand for you to stop. Voices, faint but drawing closer. You strain your ears. You can't make out the words yet, but you hear the rhythm of heavy boots and the sharp click of metal against stone. Collectors. Your pulse leaps. The man motions for you to follow him behind a thick wooden support beam. You press yourself against it, trying to make yourself small. The lantern light you were hoping for doesn't come. Instead, the tunnel remains a shadowy blur of shapes and outlines. The footsteps grow louder, more deliberate. The man leans toward you, his whisper barely audible. Don't breathe too loudly. You nod, pressing a hand over your mouth. 3 silhouettes emerge from the darkness ahead. They move in a tight formation, each one carrying a long-handled tool, part hook, part rod, part something you don't recognize. Their coats are long and dark, almost uniform-like, though not official. Their boots hit the ground in steady, rehearsed beats. One of them stops and raises a lantern, its flame bright and unsteady. He scans the walls, the floor, the ceiling. His gaze settles dangerously close to your hiding place. You feel your chest tighten, your breath trapped somewhere between fear and disbelief. The man beside you tenses. If they turn just a few inches more, they'll see you. You try not to blink. The collector lowers the lantern slowly and signals to the others. They move on, marching deeper into the passage until the echoes fade. You wait several long seconds before finally exhaling. The man steps back from the beam and nods. We need to go before they double back. You follow him again, but now your mind is racing. The collectors didn't look like guards or lawmen. They didn't look like thieves either. They looked trained, focused, as if they had a job they performed without question. What do they do with the people they find? You ask quietly. The man's expression darkens. It depends. Depends on what? On what they think you know. You feel your stomach sink. I don't know anything. They don't have to agree with you, he replies. All they need is a reason. You continue walking until the tunnel opens into a small chamber lit by faint cracks of daylight pushing through the ceiling. The man kneels by the wall and begins clearing away debris from a large iron grate. This will get us above ground, he says. But you need to understand something before we go. You crouch beside him. What? The city is dangerous in ways people don't talk about. The streets are crowded, the air is thick with coal, the nights are darker than you can imagine. But that's just the surface. What you saw down there. He glances in the direction you came. That's the part no one survives alone. He lifts the grate with a grunt and tilts it aside. I'll get you out, but I need to know something first. You tense. What? Where did you come from? The question catches you off guard. I'm just a visitor, you say, though the words feel thin and unconvincing even to you. He studies your face, searching for something you're not sure you have. A visitor doesn't end up in the tunnels, he says softly. A visitor doesn't draw the collectors. And a visitor doesn't see that corridor. He pauses. Unless they weren't supposed to be here at all. You open your mouth, but nothing comes out. The truth feels tangled and confusing. You don't know how you ended up underground. You don't know why the city feels wrong. You don't know why people look at you like they can see your thoughts written across your face. You don't even know if telling him the truth is safe. Before you can answer, a sound breaks the silence. A long, hollow creak from somewhere behind you. The man's eyes widen. They're closer than I thought. He grabs your hand and pulls you toward the grate. You climb the first rung, your fingers trembling. The faint daylight above feels impossibly far away. Behind you, the creaking grows louder, followed by a distant metallic clang. The man looks up at you urgently. Hurry, he whispers, before they reach us. You climb faster, heart pounding, but the fear rising inside you is stronger than any footsteps in the dark. Because you suddenly realize something. The sound behind you isn't getting closer. It's getting louder, as if something very big has awakened, and it's coming your way. But even as the man finished speaking, something in his voice made you feel like he wasn't telling you everything. People in the Victorian era rarely did. They guarded information the way others guarded gold. Every detail was a kind of currency, and everyone was afraid of losing more than they could earn back. You could feel the edges of that fear in the air now, heavy and tight like damp wool. The man lowered his gaze again and added quietly that if you wanted to make it through your first night, you should pay attention to what people didn't say, not what they did. It was a strange warning, but it stuck to you like soot, uncomfortable and impossible to brush off. You continued walking, trying to make sense of the path unfolding in front of you. Every step seemed to drop you deeper into the moods of Victorian London. There was a rhythm to the sounds, footsteps scraping over uneven stones, carriage wheels rattling on wooden planks laid across flooded potholes, distant church bells swallowed by fog. Somewhere close by, a group of chimney boys were shouting to each other, their voices echoing off brick as they scrambled across rooftops. Even their laughter sounded tired, as if joy was something they had to practice rather than feel. The man led you toward a narrow bridge that arched over a dark, sluggish canal. The water smelled faintly of rot, and something chemical like soap mixed with decay. Floating debris drifted past, broken bits of crates, stray wood, and even something that looked disturbingly like a doll's hand. You kept your distance from the edge as you crossed, half expecting the boards beneath you to snap. The man noticed your hesitation, but didn't comment. He simply kept walking, his pace steady and sure, as if he had walked this route every night for years. On the other side of the bridge, the street widened slightly, revealing a row of dimly lit market stalls. Most were closed, but a few stubborn vendors were still there, their lanterns flickering in the cold air. You saw a woman selling roasted chestnuts from a metal cart, her hands reddish and cracked from heat and weather. A boy stood beside her, shivering but smiling at every passerby, as if trying to earn attention in place of coins. The smell of roasted nuts was warm and inviting, a brief reminder that not everything here was harsh. Still, the woman's eyes stayed alert, scanning the street for trouble the way a mother bird watches for hawks. The man guiding you paused finally and pointed to a narrow doorway between two worn buildings. The door was made of thick wood, stained dark with age. A single candle flickered inside, casting a soft glow through a dusty window. "You can rest here for the night," he said quietly. "It's not fancy, but it's safe enough. The woman who runs the place keeps an eye on things. Just don't ask too many questions. People don't like questions." You nodded, though your mind was buzzing with them. He left you with a nod and disappeared back into the fog, swallowed so quickly that it looked as though he had never existed. You turned back to the doorway, unsure whether to step inside or keep moving. But the cold worked its way deeper into your clothes, convincing you that shelter, any shelter, was better than nothing. You pushed open the door gently, and the hinges let out a soft creak. Inside, the air was warmer and smelled faintly of tea and old wood. A small fire crackled in the corner of the common room. A few people sat scattered around the space, an older man reading a newspaper, a young seamstress repairing a coat, and a pair of dockworkers whispering to each other in low, hurried tones. Nobody looked up when you entered, as if your presence was just another part of the nightly routine. A woman appeared from behind a curtain, her gray hair tied back neatly. She had a gentle face, but sharp eyes, the kind that could read someone before they spoke. She smiled politely and asked whether you needed a bed. You nodded again, still unsure how to move within this world that felt heavy with shadows and secrets. She motioned for you to follow her and led you up a narrow staircase that groaned under every step. At the top, she opened a small wooden door to a room barely larger than a closet. There was a thin mattress on a metal frame, a tiny window, and a chipped pitcher of water on a wooden stool. It was far from comfortable, but it was safe, or at least safer than the streets outside. The woman placed a small candle on the stool and told you to keep the door locked. "Some people wander," she said quietly, and you couldn't tell whether she meant drunk visitors, restless boarders, or something else entirely. When she left, you sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the muffled sounds from down the stairs. Voices drifting, wood cracking, the wind whining through the window frame. Victorian London felt alive in a way that was hard to describe, as if the city itself had a pulse beneath the stone and soot. You could sense layers of stories beneath every whisper, histories no one had written down, but everyone carried with them. It made you wonder how many people had survived nights just like this, trying to adjust, trying to stay warm, trying to stay awake so nothing caught them off guard. But just as you were settling in, the floorboards outside your room creaked. Slow, deliberate steps moved down the hallway, pausing right outside your door. You held your breath, waiting for a knock, a voice, something. But the silence that followed was louder than either. The steps resumed after a moment, continuing down the corridor until they faded out completely. You exhaled softly, unsure whether you should feel relieved or even more uneasy. Sleep didn't come easily. Your mind kept replaying the man's warning, the dark canal, the chestnut vendor's watchful stare, and the woman's insistence on keeping your door locked. It all felt connected in ways you couldn't yet understand. Eventually, exhaustion won. You blew out the candle and lay down slowly, wrapping your thin blanket around your shoulders. Sometime later, Long after the fire downstairs had died and the streets had quieted, you woke suddenly. A faint sound drifted in from outside your window. At first you thought it was wind, but then you heard again, low and steady. Footsteps, not on the hallway floorboards this time, but directly below your window, moving across the courtyard. You sat up, heart pounding, and listened. The steps were too deliberate to belong to someone wandering aimlessly. They moved in a pattern, slow, then quick, then slow again, as if someone was searching for something or someone. You leaned toward the window carefully, not wanting to make noise. The fog outside was thick, but a dim lamplight illuminated just enough to show a shadow passing across the ground. Tall, thin, moving with unusual precision, as though the person knew exactly where to place each foot. You held your breath, watching for a face, for a clue, for anything that made sense. But then, without warning, the shadow stopped. It turned slowly, directly toward your window. You froze. The figure didn't move closer, didn't speak, didn't raise a hand. It just stood there, facing you, as if aware that you were watching. And even though you couldn't make out a face through the fog, you felt a strange certainty rise in your chest. Whoever or whatever that shadow was, it wasn't just passing through. It had come with purpose. And somehow, that purpose felt tied to you. Your pulse quickened as the shadow tilted its head slightly, as though studying the window. Studying you. The old city around you seemed to fall completely silent. No footsteps, no carriages, no voices, just the fog, the cold, and the slow realization that this night in Victorian London was far from over. Something was coming, and you weren't ready for it. You stayed completely still, barely daring to breathe as the shadow continued to face your window. The fog around it drifted like slow-moving smoke, but the figure itself didn't waver. It stood anchored, as if the cold and damp didn't bother it at all. You try to tell yourself it was just a late-night worker or a tired traveler, someone who had simply paused in the wrong spot. But the more you watched, the less that explanation felt true. There was something deliberate about its stillness, something that felt uncomfortably aware. Minutes passed without movement. Or maybe it was only seconds, you couldn't tell. Time in Victorian London seemed to stretch and compress unpredictably, almost like the fog itself was controlling the pace of everything around you. Finally, unable to take the tension any longer, you blinked. Just one blink. And when your eyes opened, the shadow was gone. You sucked in a startled breath and quickly scanned the courtyard below. Nothing. Only the dim light of the old lamp flickering weakly against the swirling mist. You pressed your hand to the window glass, half expecting it to be warm from a presence lingering on the other side. But it was ice cold, like touching a frozen pond. You drew your hand back and wrapped the blanket tighter around yourself, suddenly aware of how thin it really was. For a long moment, you debated whether to leave the room and find the woman who ran the boarding house. But something inside you whispered that doing so might draw even more attention than staying quiet. Instead, you backed away from the window, sitting down in the single wooden chair near the door. You kept your eyes on the small key resting in the lock, reassuring yourself that at least the door was secured. The hours stretched, and slowly your breathing returned to normal. You listened to the soft creaks of the old building, telling yourself they were harmless. Just wood and wind, settling around the sleeping people inside. Eventually, exhaustion crept in again, but you didn't dare lie down this time. You kept the candle close, unlit, but comforting in its presence. A small backup against the dark. When morning finally arrived, light seeped into the room like a reluctant guest. Pale, weak sunlight filtered through the fog, giving everything a washed-out glow. Victorian London never seemed truly bright, even during the day. It felt as though the clouds hung permanently low, pressing down on the city with their weight. You unlocked the door slowly and stepped into the hallway. It was quiet, but not the eerie nighttime quiet. This was the soft, ordinary hush of a building waking up. A few murmurs drifted up from downstairs, and the scent of weak tea lingered in the air. You walked down the steps, half expecting to see the shadow, waiting somewhere, but nothing stood out of place. The woman with the gray hair looked up when you entered the common room. She gave a small, knowing smile, as though she could read everything on your face without you saying a single word. She poured a cup of tea and gestured for you to sit. "You made it through the night," she said gently, as if that was an accomplishment worth acknowledging. You hesitated before joining her. The tea smelled simple but comforting, the kind of drink that warmed rather than impressed. She placed the cup in front of you and took a seat opposite. "First nights are hard for everyone," she added. "This city has a way of testing newcomers." You took a small sip and felt the warmth spread through your chest. It didn't erase your worries, but it softened them just enough to breathe more easily. The woman studied you for a moment, then lowered her voice. "Did you hear anything unusual?" Her question made your heart jump. She had asked it too casually, as if she expected you to say yes. You paused before replying, unsure how much to reveal. She didn't push. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the window, watching the fog clinging to the glass outside. "Victorian London isn't dangerous only because of crime or sickness," she said quietly. "Sometimes the danger comes from the things people refuse to talk about, the things most choose to ignore." You swallowed hard. Her words matched the tone of the city, truth buried under polite silence. Before you could ask what she meant, the door opened and the older man who had been reading the newspaper last night walked in. He was carrying a fresh copy, damp from the mist. He greeted both of you with a brief nod and sat across the room by the fire. Without a word, he unfolded the paper and began scanning the headlines. His brow furrowed almost immediately, and he muttered something under his breath. The woman glanced over. "Another one?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Near the docks this time." You looked between them, feeling the tension shift again, heavier now. The woman noticed your confusion and sighed softly. "People have been disappearing," she explained. "Not many. Not enough for the authorities to admit something is wrong, but enough for the rest of us to feel uneasy." Your stomach tightened. "Disappearing?" The older man looked up from his paper, his eyes sharp despite his age. "3 in the past month," he said. "All seen late at night. All last spotted alone." He paused for a moment before adding, "All described a stranger watching them before they vanished." Your hand tightened around your teacup. "A stranger?" The man folded the paper again. "Tall, quiet, always lingering near the fog. Folks say he doesn't walk the way normal people do. Too still, too certain." A wave of unease washed over you. The hair along your arms prickled. You thought of the steps under your window, the stillness, the way the figure had tilted its head as though recognizing you. You didn't speak for several seconds. The woman noticed and leaned slightly closer. "If you saw anything last night," she said softly, "you should be careful. Some people think the streets change when that figure is near. They say it knows things, sees things, follows those who stand out." The older man shook his head. Or it could just be gossip. People get frightened too easily. But his tone lacked conviction, as though he was trying to reassure himself more than anyone else. You stared down at your tea, trying to decide whether to tell them what you saw. But something held you back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the strange sense that speaking about the shadow might draw it even closer. Before you could decide, someone rushed in from outside, slamming the door behind them. It was a young boy, covered in soot, breathing heavily like he'd run a great distance. His clothes marked him as a chimney sweep, thin, patched, and dusted with black powder that never seemed to wash off completely. The woman stood immediately. "What is it? What happened?" The boy tried to speak, but struggled to catch his breath. He lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward the street. "Fog's thicker than normal," he managed. "Too thick. People can't see more than a few feet. And someone's out there." The room fell silent. The older man set his newspaper aside. "What do you mean someone's out there?" The boy swallowed hard. "Not a person. Not really. Something tall, moving slow, watching everyone. Folks near the bakery said it's been standing there for hours." Your pulse quickened. The boy's words felt like confirmation of something you hadn't wanted to believe. The woman closed the distance between you and her with a single worried glance. "Stay inside today," she whispered. But even as she said it, the fog outside the window grew thicker, darkening around the edges like ink spreading through water. And you couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in that fog wasn't just wandering the streets of Victorian London. It was looking for someone, and it might already know exactly where you are. The room seemed to tighten around you after the boy's words. Even the fire in the corner sounded quieter, its crackling muted like it didn't want to interrupt what was happening. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances, as if all of you shared the same thought, but weren't brave enough to say it out loud. The woman placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and guided him toward a chair, whispering something reassuring. His breathing slowed, but the fear in his eyes didn't fade. You stood there unsure whether to sit or move, your thoughts tangled between curiosity and the instinct to run. Victorian London had been unsettling from the moment you arrived, but now it felt like the city was shifting around you. The fog outside pressed against the windows, so thick you could barely see the outline of the street. It wasn't normal, not even for a place where fog was an everyday companion. This felt heavier, darker, almost alive, like it carried something inside it. The older man rubbed his temples, folding his newspaper on his lap. "We'll have to warn the others," he muttered. "If the fog is settling like that, people will be stumbling around blind." The woman nodded, but kept her eyes on you. "Some fogs come with warnings," she said softly. "You feel them before you understand them." Her gaze lingered on you in a way that made you shift in your seat. You wondered whether she sensed something you didn't. Or worse, something you were trying not to admit, even to yourself. Before you could ask, the boy spoke again, his voice small but clear. "I saw it look toward this place." Everyone froze. The woman's hand tightened gently on his shoulder. "You're frightened," she said kindly. "It was probably nothing." The boy shook his head. "No, I swear it. It stopped in the fog, and it turned this way." A cold ripple ran down your spine. You wanted to dismiss it, tell yourself the boy imagined it out of fear. But you remembered the way the shadow below your window had turned. Slowly, intentionally, as if it knew exactly where you were standing. The older man rose from his chair and moved toward the front door. He opened it only a sliver, peering outside. Fog pushed instantly into the gap, curling around his legs like smoke. He shut the door again, more firmly this time, and slid the bolt across. "Nobody goes out until it clears," he said. "Whatever's out there can wander on its own." The woman looked around at everyone present. "This isn't the first time," she murmured. Her words made the room go still again. "What do you mean?" you asked quietly. She hesitated, then sat down across from you. "There have been moments like this over the years," she said. "Not often, but enough that people remember. Nights when the fog feels too thick. Days when the streets grow quiet and even the stray dogs hide." She glanced toward the window before continuing. "And always, there's talk about a figure walking through it. Tall, still, as if part of the fog itself." The older man scoffed lightly, but sounded forced. "Stories. That's all." She didn't argue with him. She simply folded her hands and looked at you again. "You said you arrived last night?" You nodded. "Did you see anything?" she asked gently. You felt every eye in the room turn toward you, waiting, expecting. The image of the shadow below your window flashed through your mind. The stillness, the slow tilt of its head, the unmistakable sense that it was aware of you. A part of you wanted to keep it to yourself. Another part knew withholding it might make things worse. You took a slow breath. "I heard footsteps," you began quietly, "and then someone standing outside my window." You didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. You said only what you had seen. But even those simple words made the room pulse with tension. The boy's eyes widened. The woman exhaled softly, as though confirming something she had already suspected. The older man shook his head again, but this time he didn't say anything. "Did it do anything?" the woman asked. "No," you said. "Just stood there, like it was watching." The boy trembled again at the word watching. He clutched the edge of the chair, gripping it until his knuckles turned pale under the soot. The woman leaned back, thinking deeply. "Some people believe the figure appears before someone gets lost," she said. "Almost like a sign, or a warning, or a cause." The older man added quietly, surprising everyone. The woman gave him a disapproving look, but he shrugged. "If we're going to talk about stories, we might as well tell all of them," he said. Some believe the figure doesn't just appear before disappearances happen. They believe it chooses who disappears. Silence returned once again, pressing down on the room like weight on an old beam. You try to steady your breath. Victorian London was harsh, disease, hunger, cold, cramped living. But there was something different about this. Something that didn't feel rooted in the ordinary. You didn't want to believe anything supernatural was happening, but you also couldn't explain the things you had seen. And then, just as the tension inside the boarding house reached its breaking point, a loud knock echoed through the door. Everyone jumped. The woman looked toward the door, whispering. Nobody answered it. Her voice trembled slightly, only noticeable because she had been composed until now. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, heavy enough to feel through the floorboards. The older man stepped back from the door. The boy grabbed onto the woman's sleeve. You found yourself holding your breath again, but the knocking stopped. The fog outside shifted against the window, swirling like a living thing pressed against the glass. You could almost swear it moved with intention, drifting in patterns that seemed too precise to be random. A soft scrape sounded along the outer wall, something sliding, dragging lightly as though tracing the wooden boards. The noise moved from the front of the building toward the side, slow and unhurried, like whoever or whatever was outside didn't need to rush. The woman lowered her voice to a whisper. Stay away from the windows. Everyone obeyed instinctively. You stepped back, keeping your eyes on the foggy glass without getting too close. The scraping grew faint, then stopped entirely. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from somewhere deeper in the fog, a faint whistle echoed. Not a cheerful tune, not a worker calling out. It was low, hollow, stretched thin like someone blowing through a cracked flute. It drifted across the street, slipping through the fog, curling around the building like it was searching for gaps. The boy covered his ears. The older man muttered something under his breath. The woman closed her eyes, bracing herself. You felt the sound settle through you, unsettling but strangely familiar, as though you had heard it in a dream before arriving here. And that frightened you more than anything else. The whistle faded, but the tension didn't. Outside, the fog continued to thicken, swallowing the street, the buildings, the city. And the feeling grew stronger, an unmistakable sense that whatever moved through the fog wasn't wandering aimlessly. It was looking for someone. In every instinct you had whispered the same truth. That someone might be you. The fire crackled low as Oliver sat awake, long after he should have been asleep. The maps he had collected from the library, old sketches of Victorian London streets, drawn by anonymous hands, were spread across the floor in a messy circle around him. The streets twisted like vines, complicated and uneasy, and every time he tried to follow a single path from one side to the other, he found himself lost in dead ends, looping alleys, and names that didn't exist anymore. It was strange how a city could feel familiar in daylight, yet turn into something unrecognizable as soon as darkness took over. He rubbed his eyes, feeling the exhaustion tug at him, but he couldn't stop. Not tonight. Not when he kept remembering that faint whisper he had heard the night before, the one that didn't belong to the wind. Eliza had heard something too, even if she was trying hard to pretend she hadn't. She was usually fearless, at least in front of him, but earlier she had lingered by the window with an expression that didn't match her calm tone. She said she was just listening to the street below, but he caught the way her hands trembled as she closed the curtain. It was the same uneasiness he felt. Something was moving around them, something they couldn't see. He leaned back against the wall, breathing in the old smell of smoke and wood, and tried to think about everything they had learned so far. Victorian London wasn't an easy place to survive, not for anyone, not even people born into it. The cold alone could break a person, and the lack of clean water and proper food wasn't just a hardship, it was a daily battle. Crowded alleys, exhausted workers, carriages rattling through narrow passages, and factories pouring dark smoke over everything. Eliza had once joked that even sleep felt polluted here. But despite all of that, the city had its own strange pull, as if hidden inside all the grime and noise was a quiet rhythm that kept people moving. They had seen kindness too, A shopkeeper who gave bread to a struggling mother, a young boy who carried water for neighbors with no expectation of being paid, a group of workers sharing leftover broth with Oliver and Eliza one night when they had no coins left. These moments reminded them that people in this city weren't only hardened by survival, they were bonded by it. Still, the mystery that kept tugging at them didn't belong to the daylight part of London. It whispered from its shadows, from the narrow gaps between homes where cold drafts carried stories and warnings. And the more they learned, the more they realized that many things in Victorian London weren't written in history books. Some truths were never meant to be found easily. Eliza's footsteps approached quietly from the hallway. She appeared in the doorway with a candle in her hand, her face glowing softly in the orange light. "You're still awake," she said, though it came out more like a gentle question than a complaint. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "My mind keeps going back to earlier, to that sound." She hesitated, chewing lightly on her bottom lip. "I heard it too. I just didn't want to say anything." She set the candle on the floor beside the maps and knelt down. It didn't sound like an animal, and it didn't sound like a person either. "No," Oliver whispered. "It didn't." For a moment they just sat there, listening to the shifting wind outside. The window rattled once, and Eliza moved closer without thinking, her shoulder lightly pressing against his. It was comforting, even if neither of them wanted to admit they needed comfort. "What if it's connected to whatever we've been following?" she asked quietly. "The story Mr. Harlan mentioned, about the people who disappeared during the winter of 1889. The ones who were last seen near the old warehouses by the river." Oliver nodded. "I keep thinking about that too, and about the message carved into that wooden post. The one that looked like it was written in a hurry. 'Don't follow the lights,'" she recited under her breath. I can't stop thinking about it. The memory of it sent a chill down his spine. The words had looked desperate, uneven, and the wood around them had been scratched so deeply it was clear someone carved them with shaking hands. They didn't know who wrote it or why, but the warning felt personal. Oliver pushed one of the maps toward her. "Look at this. The warehouses are right next to the old dock, and that alley behind them leads here." He traced the curved path with his finger. "This spot, it doesn't exist anymore. But back then, it must have been a crossing point." Eliza narrowed her eyes. "A crossing point for what?" "I don't know." He sighed. "But whatever people were afraid of, it kept pulling them toward the river. And now it's pulling us." He didn't answer. The truth was, he wasn't sure. They weren't forced into this. They could walk away at any moment, leave the maps behind, pretend they never heard the whisper or found the warning. But something deeper kept drawing them forward. Maybe curiosity, maybe fear, maybe something they didn't have the words for yet. Eliza closed her eyes for a second, gathering herself. "If we go back there tomorrow, we need to be more careful. Victorian London is unpredictable enough in daylight. At night, well, we've seen how quickly things can change." He remembered the night they got lost near Spitalfields. The fog rolled in so thick they could barely see their hands. Every shadow had seemed alive, moving, stretching, reaching. They eventually found their way out thanks to a kind woman closing her stall late, but the fear from that night still clung to them like damp air. "We should talk to someone who knows those old stories," Eliza said suddenly. "Someone local. Someone who remembers things that aren't written anywhere. Do you know anyone like that?" She paused. "Maybe." Oliver looked at her carefully. "You're not telling me something." "It's not that," she said quickly. I didn't think we need to go this deep. But if we're going to keep following this path, then you should meet her. She's older, but she remembers her grandmother's stories. She knows things about Victorian London that most people ignore because they sound strange. Strange is kind of what we're dealing with," he said. Eliza nodded. "Her name is Mrs. Mira. She lives near the edge of the old district. If anyone can help us understand what's happening, what we heard, she can." Oliver felt a mix of relief and worry. "All right, we'll visit her tomorrow." A gust of wind slammed against the window, making them both jump. The candle flickered violently, almost going out. Eliza grabbed it, steadying her hand. "Maybe we should sleep in shifts," she whispered. He didn't argue. Tonight felt different. Charged. Watchful. As he pulled a blanket around him and tried to lie down, He couldn't shake the feeling that the city outside wasn't resting. Victorian London seemed to be waiting, breathing, like it sensed they were getting closer to something hidden beneath its cobblestone streets and soot-darkened rooftops. The last thing he heard before drifting into uneasy sleep was Eliza whispering a soft promise to herself. "We'll find the truth," she said, "but I don't know if we're ready for what comes with it." And somewhere outside, barely audible, something moved. Oliver woke before sunrise, jolted by a feeling he couldn't name. Not fear exactly, but a heaviness in his chest, like something was sitting there waiting for him to open his eyes. The room was cold, colder than usual, and the candle they left burning overnight had gone out on its own. Eliza was already awake, sitting by the window, wrapped in her shawl, staring at the fog pressing against the glass. She didn't turn when he got up. "It's thicker than yesterday," she said quietly. "The fog. It's been coming earlier every day, like the city is hiding something." Oliver rubbed his hands together for warmth. "Or try to keep us from seeing something." She finally faced him, and there was a seriousness in her expression that made his stomach twist. "Then we need to hurry. If we're going to see Mrs. Mira today, we can't waste time. The longer we wait, the harder it'll be to find the truth." They dressed quickly and stepped out into the narrow street. Victorian London in the early morning carried a mix of silence and subtle movement. Vendors dragging carts into place, lamps being extinguished one by one, workers starting their day with tired faces and heavy steps. But beneath that ordinary hum, Oliver sensed a tension thickening the air. Even the pigeons fluttering above them seemed restless. They walked past brick walls darkened by soot, past the uneven cobblestones that glistened with a thin layer of frost. The cold bit into their skin, but the urgency in their steps kept them moving. Eliza led the way through tight alleys and dim passageways, the fog curling behind them like soft threads. "How far is her place?" Oliver asked after several minutes. "Not far," Eliza said, though her eyes kept darting around. "But this part of the old district changes. The streets don't always match the maps." "What do you mean?" "You'll see." He didn't like the sound of that. Victorian London had always felt unpredictable, especially with its twisting alleys and sudden corners. But this morning the uneasiness was stronger. It was as if the city was shifting beneath them. A carriage rattled past, the wheels splashing into a puddle, and for a moment Oliver swore the fog moved inward, swallowing the street behind them. When they reached Mrs. Mira's neighborhood, the atmosphere changed again. Houses stood older here, their wooden frames creaking softly in the cold. Some had boarded windows, some had leaning doors, and others looked abandoned, even though faint smoke curled from the chimneys. It was a place layered with stories, the kind that stayed trapped between the walls. Eliza stopped in front of a small house with a faded green door. She knocked twice and stepped back. After a few seconds, the door opened a crack and an eye peered through. "Eliza," the voice said, rough but calm. "I wondered when you'd return." Mrs. Mira opened the door fully, letting them inside. She was older than Oliver expected, silver hair braided neatly, eyes sharp, posture straight despite the years. Her house smelled of dried herbs and something slightly sweet, like old flowers preserved with care. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars, books, and small carved wooden pieces. "You brought company," she said, studying Oliver. "Good. This story isn't meant to be carried alone." Oliver exchanged a glance with Eliza, unsure how much Mrs. Mira already understood. "We heard something last night," Eliza began, "and before that, the message carved into the post near the river." Mrs. Mira nodded slowly. The warning." Her reaction sent a ripple of cold down Oliver's arms. "You know what it means?" "Pieces of it," she said. Victorian London was never only cobblestones and chimneys. There were stories hidden beneath the everyday. Some were just tales people used to scare their children. Others were not. She motioned for them to sit, then poured warm tea into 3 clay cups. Her hands were steady, but her voice carried the weight of someone who had lived through more than she cared to tell. "There were whispers," she said, "about lights that appeared near the old river docks. Lights that moved as if guiding people somewhere. Some believed they were tricks of fog or reflections from lanterns, but those who followed them disappeared. Oliver felt his pulse pick up. Disappeared how? Gone, she said. Vanished. No trace. No footsteps. No sightings. Nothing. Eliza swallowed hard. And the sounds? The ones we heard. Mrs. Myra's expression darkened. The city remembers those it loses. Sometimes it echoes them back. Oliver's hand tightened around the cup. So the whisper was from someone who vanished. Perhaps, she said, or something else entirely. Victorian London is full of layers. Some are physical. Some are stories. Some are things in between. He set his cup down, trying to make sense of it. What about the carved message? Don't follow the lights? Someone wrote it like they were in danger. They were, Mrs. Myra said simply. The lights lure people. Always have. They're not natural. They're not lanterns. And they don't appear everywhere. Only near the water, near the places where the fog grows thicker. The old stories say those lights belonged to something that fed on fear, something drawn to loneliness and wandering souls. Eliza tensed. We saw a light last night. Mrs. Myra's eyes snapped up. Where? Near our window, Oliver said. Only for a second. Mrs. Myra stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. You need to stay away from the river tonight. And you need to leave this neighborhood before the fog settles. It's already changing. Oliver felt the back of his neck prickle. Changing how? Mrs. Myra walked to the window and pushed aside the curtain. The fog outside had thickened unnaturally fast, pressing against the glass in soft waves. The street was barely visible now, only outlines of houses and lampposts blurred by shifting whiteness. It's moving earlier than it should, she whispered. That means it's searching. Eliza stepped closer. Searching for what? For whatever got its attention, Mrs. Myra said. And you too, you've stirred something. Oliver's stomach dropped. He didn't know whether to believe her fully, but the fear building inside him was real. So was the cold tightening around the neighborhood. There must be something we can do, he said. Something to stop it. Mrs. Myra turned, her expression filled with a warning he didn't quite understand. Stopping it is not your task. Surviving it is. A loud thud echoed from outside, deep and heavy, like something striking the ground. Eliza grabbed Oliver's arm. Mrs. Myra didn't move, but her eyes widened slightly. What was that? Oliver whispered. Stay still, she murmured. And don't make a sound. Another thud came, closer this time. The cups on the table rattled softly. The fog pressed harder against the window, as if something was leaning into it from the other side. We should leave, Eliza whispered, panic rising in her voice. Now, we should go. But when Oliver looked toward the door, he saw something that froze him completely. A faint glow, soft, pale, shifting, was passing across the bottom of the doorframe. Not candlelight, not daylight. Something else. Something moving, growing brighter, and slowly stopping right outside. The glow under the door didn't stay still. It pulsed as if breathing, soft, slow, steady. Oliver's heartbeat matched the rhythm before he even realized it, falling into an uneasy sync with the light. Eliza clutched his wrist tightly, her nails digging into his skin, but he didn't flinch. He couldn't. The glow felt strangely magnetic, like it wanted him to move closer, to just look. Mrs. Myra stepped between them and the door, her posture tense despite her frail frame. Don't go near it, she whispered. Don't even blink too slowly. It's searching for weakness. Eliza's voice trembled. What happens if it finds someone? Mrs. Myra didn't turn. You don't want to know. A long, thin shadow slid across the floorboards, stretching unnaturally as the glow brightened. It wasn't shaped like a person or an object. It was narrow, fluid, like fog made into a living line. The wooden boards beneath it chilled instantly, frost blooming outward in delicate, branching veins. Oliver backed up until he hit the table, his breath turning to mist in the air. Victorian London's cold mornings were normal. This wasn't. This was biting, sharp, almost metallic. The kind of cold that came with intent. Mrs. Myra raised a small pouch from her pocket and crushed it in her hand. A faint smell of herbs spread through the room. This will give us time, she murmured. Not protection, just time. The shadow paused. The glow flickered. Then, slowly, so slowly, it began to slide away from the doorframe, retreating like a wave pulling back from shore. Oliver exhaled shakily. What was that? Mrs. Mira waited until the last trace of light faded before answering. One of the things that walks with the fog. Some call them watchers. Some call them wanderers. But they're not ours, and they're not friendly. Eliza swallowed. Did it follow us here? Maybe, Mrs. Mira said calmly. Or maybe it was already nearby. But whatever happens next, she faced them with steady eyes. You must not be outside when night falls. Victorian London after dark belongs to things that don't forgive trespassers. Oliver nodded, though 100 questions spun in his mind. Then what do we do now? Mrs. Mira motioned for them to sit again, though her hands shook slightly. I'll tell you what I know, and then you leave. You head toward the central district. Stay where people are. Crowds thin the fog, and noise keeps the watchers away. But what about the lights? Eliza asked. Why do they appear? What are they guiding people to? Mrs. Mira lowered herself into her chair, the weight of her memories settling heavily around them. Long ago, before this part of London was built, the river had a shallower bend. People believed it had a spirit. Not an evil one, just old, protective, watching over travelers who crossed by boat. But as the city grew, the river was walled in, forced to change its path. Some say the spirit changed with it. And when things lose their home, they lash out. Oliver frowned. But the lights aren't the spirit, she said. They're what came after. People don't know where they began. Some say the fog took shape. Others say something ancient woke beneath the water. But those who followed the lights never returned. And sometimes the lights come looking. Eliza shivered. Why us? We're just trying to understand the past. Mrs. Mira gave her a long, searching look. Knowledge isn't harmless. Not in a city with buried stories. The fog pressed weakly against the window again, the glass humming with each wave. Oliver leaned forward. If the lights lure people, how do we avoid them? Mrs. Mira reached into a drawer and pulled out 2 small, thin strips of dark cloth. Wear these over your left wrist, she said. They won't protect you completely. But the watchers and the lights sense movement and fear. These help soften your presence. Eliza hesitated before tying the cloth around her wrist. It feels warm. That's good, Mrs. Mira said. It means it recognizes you. Oliver tied his, feeling a faint vibration under his skin. Not soothing, more like a heartbeat separate from his own. A sudden knock at the door made all 3 of them jump. Not a loud one, just 2 slow, deliberate taps. Mrs. Mira froze. Eliza covered her mouth. Oliver felt every muscle in his body tighten. The knock came again. 2 taps. Then silence. Mrs. Mira stood, her face pale. That's not for us, she whispered. It's mimicking. The watchers do that when they're trying to trick someone into opening the door. Oliver felt cold sweat form at the back of his neck. We didn't make any noise. You breathed, Mrs. Mira said. Sometimes that's enough. The knock happened a 3rd time, this one louder, harder. The cups rattled on the table again, and the herbs on the shelves trembled like they sensed danger. Eliza leaned close to Oliver. We can't stay here. I know. Mrs. Mira stepped away from the door and grabbed a small lantern from her shelf. You need to leave through the back. Now, the fog hasn't closed the alley yet. Oliver stood. But what about you? She gave him a sad smile. This is my home. I've lived with these stories longer than you've been alive. I'll be fine. The 4th knock shook the door violently. Something scraped against the wood, long and slow, like a fingernail dragging across it. Eliza's breath hitched. Please come with us. Mrs. Mira shook her head. My place is here. Yours isn't. She opened the back door, ushering them out into a narrow alley. The fog wasn't as thick here, but it was spreading fast, rolling low to the cobblestones like steam from boiling water. Head straight, she said. Don't look behind you. If you see a light, even a small one, don't follow it. Don't approach it. Don't let it catch your eye. Oliver nodded, but worry tightened his throat. Will we see you again? Mrs. Mira touched Eliza's shoulder and gave Oliver one last steady look. I hope so. Then she closed the door quietly, leaving them alone in the creeping fog. For a few seconds, it didn't move. The alley stretched ahead like a narrow tunnel carved out of drifting white. The air felt heavy, muffled, like sound itself had been swallowed. "Let's go," Eliza whispered, gripping Oliver's arm. They stepped forward, their footsteps soft on the damp stones. The fog curled around their ankles, rising with every step they took. After a minute, Oliver heard something behind them. A faint tap, then another. He didn't turn. Neither did Eliza. But the tapping grew quicker, closer, following. And up ahead, barely visible through the thickening fog, a small pale glow flickered to life. Waiting, Oliver's legs moved on their own, carrying him and Eliza deeper into the foggy alley, each step echoing faintly off the brick walls. The glow ahead pulsed, irregular now, as though it sensed their hesitation. His heart thumped painfully in his chest, matching the rhythm of the faint hum in the air, a hum that had started almost imperceptibly but now seemed to wrap around them, crawling under their skin. He remembered Mrs. Myra's warning, "Don't let it catch your eye." He forced himself to look slightly to the side, not directly at the light, but it flickered in his peripheral vision, teasing him, beckoning. Eliza whispered his name. "Oliver, look." She pointed to a faint outline in the fog, something moving with unnatural grace. It wasn't the watcher they'd seen at Mrs. Myra's door. No, this one was taller, broader, and its movements didn't match any human gait. Its head tilted at impossible angles, almost as if it were examining them, calculating their pace. Oliver froze, gripping Eliza's hand tightly. The glow shifted, trailing along the figure's chest, illuminating faint hints of what looked like eyes, but not quite human. Something in the way it watched them felt intelligent, deliberate. Suddenly, the figure vanished. Oliver exhaled shakily, thinking perhaps it had retreated into the thick fog. Relief was short-lived. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a shadow detach from the wall, thin at first, but rapidly stretching and expanding until it took on the same impossible height as the watcher. Then another appeared, and another. The alley felt suddenly crowded, alive with forms moving silently through the haze, each glowing faintly in turn. The watchers weren't just following, they were coordinating, surrounding them. Eliza tugged at his arm. "We need to hide." But every doorway they passed was either sealed or too narrow. The alley narrowed further ahead, like a funnel leading them somewhere unseen. Panic tightened around Oliver's chest. He remembered the warnings carved into the post, the stories of vanished people, the warnings Mrs. Mira had whispered. They weren't just lucky. They had been noticed, and now the city itself seemed to conspire against them. As they stumbled forward, the glow ahead flared brighter, and Oliver saw movement he didn't expect, a figure, human this time, emerging from the mist. At first, he thought it was a rescuer, a local coming to guide them to safety. But the closer the figure got, the more details became terrifying. Its clothes were soaked and tattered, skin pale as if drained of blood, eyes hollow but alert, reflecting the same ghostly glow of the watchers. And it wasn't alone. Behind it, smaller figures began emerging, shapes he could only describe as children, moving silently but in perfect formation, their faces expressionless. Oliver's throat went dry. "Eliza, do you see them?" "Yes," she whispered. What is this?" The pale figure raised its arm slowly, and a whispering voice slithered through the fog, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You shouldn't be here." The watcher's glow intensified, and the human figure began advancing toward them, each step echoing unnaturally in the alley. But just as Oliver braced for the worst, the figure halted. The glow around it didn't dim. Instead, it flickered rapidly, almost like it was signaling. Then, in a horrifyingly deliberate move, the pale figure turned sharply and gestured toward a side alley Oliver hadn't noticed before, a narrow, barely visible passage that seemed swallowed by fog. "Go!" Eliza hissed, and they darted toward the passage. The watchers didn't move. For a moment, Oliver thought perhaps they were trapped, but then he felt it, the hum in the air intensifying, vibrating through the ground, through his bones. The watchers were waiting, observing, judging. The side alley they had ducked in led them to a small courtyard, abandoned, surrounded by dilapidated buildings. It smelled of damp wood and rot, and the ground squelched beneath their boots. Relief surged briefly. They were hidden, or so they thought. Oliver noticed something strange at the far end of the courtyard. A wooden crate, overturned, hiding a bundle of letters and papers. Curious despite the danger, he moved toward it. Eliza reached for his arm, but he ignored her. The letters were old, brittle, covered in soot, but some lines were still legible. They detailed disappearances, strange lights on the river, and a warning repeated over and over. The watchers do not forgive those who linger. One letter caught his attention more than the rest. It was addressed to someone named Thomas, dated decades ago. The last line made his blood run cold. If you read this and follow the fog, know that what moves with it has remembered your face. Eliza grabbed his arm. Oliver, we shouldn't be touching that. He froze. Something shifted behind them, a soft, scraping sound. Not the watchers, not yet. Something else. He looked up and saw a shadow detached from the wall, moving independently, slower but with purpose, heading straight for them. The courtyard, which had seemed like a safe pocket, now felt like a trap. The fog started seeping in from the edges, curling around the crates and walls, swallowing their escape routes. Oliver realized the watchers weren't just after them. They were corralling them. And the human figure? It had reappeared at the courtyard entrance, pale face illuminated by an inner glow, watching them with patient menace. Eliza whispered, her voice almost breaking. Oliver, what if it's too late? He clenched the letters, realizing that the writings were not just warnings. They were instructions. But instructions meant for people decades ago. Were they even meant for them? And yet, the sense of urgency was unmistakable. Whoever, or whatever, was moving with the fog, it already knew their presence. It had tracked them through the streets, past Mrs. Mira, and even through the alley that should have hidden them. A sudden movement to the right caught Oliver's eye. Another watcher, one that hadn't been there before, dropped silently from the roof above. It landed without sound, blocking their only apparent escape. The glow around it expanded, illuminating the courtyard in an eerie, pale light. The figure at the entrance raised its arm again. This time, Oliver could make out a faint symbol etched into its sleeve, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable, a mark he had seen in one of the letters. Everything clicked at once. The watchers, the disappearances, the warnings, the fog, the lights. Victorian London had layers of secrets that had survived centuries. And now, somehow, those secrets were awake, aware, and focused entirely on them. Eliza tugged at him urgently. We have to run, Oliver. We can't fight this. He nodded, but before they could move, the scraping sound returned, closer this time. Something, or someone, was pushing through the fog at the far end of the courtyard, unseen but undeniably present. The watchers stiffened, turning their attention from the pale figure toward the new threat. The pale figure's glow flared, sharp and angry, as if the arrival had interrupted its hunt. And in that moment, Oliver understood the terrifying truth. The watchers weren't the only danger. Something else was coming. Something bigger. Something older. The fog shifted violently, curling and twisting like a living storm, and the courtyard felt impossibly small, closing in from all sides. Their breathing came in shallow gasps. Their hearts raced, and Oliver realized that no matter what they did next, whatever was coming would force them to confront the darkest secrets of the city, and perhaps themselves. The pale figure took a step forward, the glow flaring brighter than ever. The watchers at the edges of the courtyard moved in unison, closing the circle. The scraping grew louder, echoing through the fog and bouncing off the walls, announcing that the unseen threat was almost here. Oliver turned to Eliza. We're trapped. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. No, there has to be a way out. But even as she said it, the ground beneath them shivered slightly. The fog thickened, blurring the line between reality and something else entirely. And in that moment, Oliver felt it, the true weight of the city's darkness pressing down on them. They weren't just in Victorian London. They were in the heart of a living, watching history. And whatever came next would decide if they survived or became part of the stories themselves. The fog surged. The watchers closed in. The pale figure advanced. And at the far edge of the courtyard, a shadow moved that wasn't like the others, a presence that promised the next revelation would be worse than anything they had imagined. They had reached the point of no return. Oliver's pulse raced as he pressed himself against the damp brick wall, Eliza clinging to his side. The fog in the courtyard had thickened so densely it was almost physical, curling around their legs and chilling them through the thin layers of clothing. Every sound seemed magnified. The scrape of unseen feet across the stones, the whisper of shifting air, the faint hum of the watcher's glow pulsating like a heartbeat. The courtyard no longer felt safe. It felt alive, anticipating their next move. Eliza's voice was barely audible. "Oliver, what do we do? We can't fight them." He shook his head. "No, we can't fight. We have to." He stopped mid-sentence as a new movement caught his eye. From afar into the courtyard, another shadow emerged. Unlike the watchers that had been circling them, this one was taller, broader, and moved with a fluid, almost human grace. Its presence made the very fog seem to retreat slightly, carving a path through the mist. The pale figure they had seen before now seemed to bow subtly, as if acknowledging this new arrival. The shadow paused just beyond the edge of the glowing fog. A single faint light flickered around it, barely enough to reveal its form. Long coat, hat pulled low over its face, gloves covering its hands. Its features were indistinct, but its eyes. Oliver felt their weight like a physical force pressing into his mind. They were aware, calculating, and most chilling of all, familiar. Eliza tugged at his arm, fear in her voice. "Do you see it? Do you see it? I think I know who or what it is," Oliver whispered. The letters they had found earlier swirled in his mind. The mention of Thomas, the warnings, and the last line, "If you read this and follow the fog, know that what moves with it has remembered your face." The figure tilted its head, as if testing whether they were listening, whether they understood. Then it moved, a single step forward, and the courtyard seemed to shrink around them. Oliver realized in that moment that the watchers weren't the only threat. The pale figure, the new shadow, the fog itself, they were all part of something larger, something organized, deliberate, and hungry. He glanced at Eliza. Her eyes were wide, fear mingled with determination. "We have to get to the river," she said urgently. "That's where the letters said the lights appear. Maybe there's a way to stop it." Oliver nodded, though he wasn't sure whether she meant the lights, the watchers, or whatever the new figure represented. Either way, moving meant running straight into danger. They darted across the courtyard, the fog wrapping around them like hands trying to pull them back. Every step brought a new sound, the scrape of unseen claws, a faint whisper through the mist, the glow of multiple watchers blinking at them from the edges. The shadow in the long coat moved in tandem, keeping pace without breaking stride. Oliver tried to glance at it, but its features remained obscured, like a mask crafted from the fog itself. Suddenly, a low, resonant hum rolled through the alleyway. It vibrated through the ground, through their bones, through their teeth. The watchers stiffened, their pale glow flickering erratically. Even the shadow in the coat seemed to hesitate, its head tilting slightly. Oliver realized with a jolt that the hum wasn't coming from any one direction. It was coming from beneath them. "What is that?" Eliza gasped. "I don't know," he said, fear tightening his throat. "But it's big, bigger than all of this." The ground beneath their feet shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly at first, then more forcefully, causing Oliver to stumble. The fog around them seemed to swirl with purpose, forming shapes and patterns that weren't natural. For a brief moment, he could have sworn he saw figures of people trapped within it, faces pressed against the swirling mist, mouths opening silently, as if screaming. The pale figure moved suddenly, darting forward and placing itself between Oliver, Eliza, and the far end of the courtyard. Its glow flared, and in the sudden light, Oliver glimpsed the symbol etched on its sleeve, identical to the one in the letters. He realized with horror that this figure wasn't just a messenger. It was a sentinel, a guide, or perhaps a warden. Eliza grabbed his hand. There, a gate. I see a passage to the river. Oliver followed her gaze. Between two crumbling warehouses, a narrow archway led into what appeared to be a small, fog-drenched street. It was partially blocked by debris, but it was their only chance. They ran, hearts hammering, boots splashing through icy puddles. The watchers responded instantly, moving like ripples across the fog, closing in on them from all sides. Every turn seemed to lead them into another corner, another trap. The shadow and the coat mirrored their movements, always appearing just ahead or slightly behind, never letting them out of its sight. As they reached the archway, a hand shot out from the fog, grabbing Eliza's wrist. She screamed, and Oliver spun, kicking at the figure holding her. The fog twisted violently, forming a dense wall between them and the alley behind. When it cleared, Eliza was free, but the watchers had multiplied, appearing on every side, their pale glow forming a circle that cut off retreat. Oliver's breath came in ragged gasps. We're trapped. No, not yet, Eliza said, eyes darting to the river visible through the archway. We just have to reach it. Maybe the water, maybe the lights, whatever is in the river will give us a chance. Oliver nodded, gripping her hand tightly. They sprinted through the archway, slipping over broken bricks and dodging puddles that reflected ghostly shapes. The fog was thicker here, rolling off the river in waves that seemed almost alive, curling around their legs and tugging at them. Suddenly, from the fog ahead, a blinding light appeared. Not soft and ghostly like the watcher's glow, but sharp, almost piercing. Oliver shielded his eyes, and when he looked again, he saw the river, but it wasn't calm. The water moved unnaturally, swirling with currents that defied reason, glowing faintly in the pre-dawn light. The watchers halted at the river's edge, hovering silently, as if they couldn't cross. Eliza's grip tightened. Do you see it? The lights, they're in the water. Oliver squinted, heart racing. Shapes moved beneath the surface, faint silhouettes twisting and turning, glowing softly. The lights weren't just reflections. They were something alive, something aware, beckoning. And then he saw movement behind the lights. Something large, dark, rising from the river like it had been sleeping beneath the city for centuries. The watchers recoiled slightly, their glow flickering violently. The shadow in the coat stepped back, raising a hand as if to shield itself. Eliza whispered, almost to herself, That's impossible. Oliver didn't answer. The water surged, sending ripples across the courtyard, splashing the feet of the watchers who hadn't retreated. The fog twisted violently, the watchers' glow dimming as though the river itself was asserting dominance. Oliver realized with sudden clarity, they weren't just facing the watchers or the shadow in the coat anymore. The river, the lights, and whatever had awoken beneath the water were now part of the conflict. The stakes had escalated beyond anything they could have anticipated. If they didn't act, if they didn't understand what the lights were trying to show them, they might become part of the city's hidden stories themselves. Another set of names to be whispered in warning letters decades from now. Eliza pressed closer to him, her eyes wide with fear and awe. We have to go in, she said. We have no choice. If we stay here, Oliver swallowed, feeling the chill of the mist and the weight of the watcher's gaze. He knew she was right. Standing here meant waiting for the unseen to claim them. But stepping into the river, into the glowing, writhing water that was crossing into the unknown, the shadow in the coat moved forward, but instead of blocking them, it stopped just short of the riverbank, staring. The watchers began shifting uneasily, their glow dimming as if sensing the same thing Oliver did. And then, without warning, the water exploded with light, and shapes emerged, tall, fluid, half-human, half-unknown, glowing and twisting in patterns that made reality itself seem to shiver. The fog twisted violently, the watchers recoiling, and Oliver knew in that moment that the final confrontation was about to begin. He turned to Eliza. "Whatever happens next, we have to trust the river. Trust the lights." She nodded, her face pale but determined. "I'm ready." And together, they stepped into the glowing water, into the heart of Victorian London's living, watching secrets. The fog closed behind them, the watchers frozen at the river's edge, and the shadow in the coat paused, silent, observing. The city seemed to hold its breath, and somewhere beneath the lights, something ancient stirred, waiting to decide whether Oliver and Eliza would survive or be claimed. The climax was approaching, and nothing would ever be the same. Oliver's feet sank slightly into the cold water, sending ripples outward that glimmered under the strange, undulating light. The river wasn't behaving like any river he had ever known. It felt alive, almost sentient, and each ripple seemed to react to their presence. Eliza clutched his hand tightly, and he could feel her trembling even through the thick layers of wool. The glow beneath the water cast shifting shapes on their faces, making them look ghostly, almost unreal. From the center of the river, the water rose in a slow, curling motion, forming shapes that resembled long-forgotten silhouettes of people. They moved fluidly, twisting and bending, glowing with pale blue and silver light. Their eyes, if they had eyes, were closed, but Oliver felt them watching. Every pulse of light seemed to thrum with intent, like a heartbeat he could feel in his chest. What is this?" Eliza whispered, voice shaking. "I think they're the lost," Oliver said, remembering Mrs. Myra's words. "The people who followed the lights and vanished. They never left the city. They became part of it." The watchers at the riverbank hissed softly, their glow dimming as if they were reluctant to approach. Even the shadow in the coat seemed hesitant, remaining at the water's edge and raising its hand slowly, as if acknowledging something beyond comprehension. Oliver realized that whatever lived in the river was older, stronger, and far more dangerous than the watchers had ever been. A sudden movement in the water made Oliver stumble back. A massive shape surfaced, its form like a shadowy giant beneath the water, but shimmering with light along its edges. Its head rose, long and narrow, vaguely humanoid, but with fluid lines that made impossible to define. And then it opened its mouth, or what passed for a mouth, and a hum vibrated through the air, low and resonant, rattling their teeth. Eliza gasped. "It's speaking." Oliver felt the vibration in his chest, resonating with the pulse of the watcher's glow and the hum of the fog. He could understand it, not with words, but with something deeper, something primal. It was warning them, commanding them, testing them. Suddenly, the waters around the figures erupted. Glowing tendrils shot out toward Oliver and Eliza, sweeping past them, then retracting at the last second. Each tendril seemed alive, moving as if guided by thought rather than physics. Oliver realized that this wasn't just a river. It was a sentient barrier, judging whether they were worthy to continue. Eliza grabbed his arm. "We have to move. We can't let it reach us." Oliver hesitated, but then he remembered the letters, Mrs. Myra's warning, the carved messages. They weren't meant for them to run blindly. They were meant to guide them. He took a deep breath. "We have to follow the lights. The tendrils, they're testing us. We have to be deliberate." They stepped carefully into the river, following the faint glowing path that wound through the water. Each step made the tendrils pulse toward them, and Oliver could feel the river testing their courage, their intention. One misstep, one flicker of fear, and he knew the water would reject them, or worse. The shadow in the coat remained at the riverbank, still observing. The watchers lingered behind, unable or unwilling to cross. Oliver realized something terrifying. Whatever lived in the river, whatever the lights represented, it was ancient. It had rules older than the city, rules that didn't bend for human fear. Suddenly, one of the glowing figures in the water shifted abruptly, moving toward them with startling speed. Oliver froze. Eliza tensed beside him. The figure's glow flared brightly, blinding for a moment. And then it spoke. No, not with words, but through the pulse in the water, a thought that entered their minds directly. Do you understand why you are here? Oliver's mouth went dry. He shook his head slightly, unsure if he could answer aloud. We seek the truth, he thought, hesitating. The figure pulsed again. Truth requires sacrifice. Do you trust the city to reveal it? Eliza's hand squeezed his. We have to. There's no other way. The river pulsed violently in response, the tendrils twisting and curling around their legs, but never touching them directly. It was testing their resolve, measuring their courage. Oliver felt every heartbeat echo through the water, every breath synchronized with the rhythm of the river's strange life. And then the shadow in the coat moved. Slowly, deliberately, it stepped into the river. Oliver held his breath. The watchers at the bank recoiled, as if sensing betrayal, confusion spreading among them. The coat figure's glow was faint, almost blending with the fog, but it advanced, crossing the glowing path toward the center of the river. Eliza whispered, fear and awe in her voice. What is it doing? Oliver could only watch, heart hammering. The coat figure reached the center, where the largest, glowing figure hovered, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden burst, the river's glow intensified, wrapping the coat figure in light. Its form distorted, bending and twisting as if it were being remade. Oliver realized with a shiver that the coat figure wasn't a human ally. It was another part of the city's system, a servant of the lights. And now, it had chosen to act, reshaping itself within the river's energy, merging with something far older and more powerful. The water around them surged violently, knocking Oliver and Eliza off balance. He grabbed her hand instinctively, dragging her upright. The glowing tendrils lashed at them, faster, more aggressive, testing their every move. But this time, the river pulsed rhythmically, almost giving them a path forward, guiding them. Eliza's voice was firm despite the chaos. We have to trust it. Follow the path. Step by step, they advanced, the river moving around them with a strange intelligence. The watchers at the bank flickered nervously, unable to intervene. And then, through the pulsing water, Oliver glimpsed the heart of the river's secret, a massive, glowing form beneath the surface, eyes closed but radiating power. The lights weren't just guides. They were manifestations of the river's memory, holding the stories of the vanished, the forgotten, the lost of Victorian London. Oliver's breath caught. He realized that the letters, the warnings, the watchers, they had all been part of a system designed to test outsiders, to see if they were worthy of the city's hidden truths. And now, standing in the water, following the lights, he and Eliza were being judged. The water around the massive, glowing form began to swirl violently, rising into a towering spiral of light and mist. The coat figure had merged completely, its presence now indistinguishable from the river itself. The watchers recoiled further, flickering desperately as the fog twisted in response to the surge of energy. Eliza's grip on his arm tightened. Oliver, this is it. Whatever happens now, we can't turn back. Oliver nodded, feeling both fear and exhilaration. They had entered the heart of Victorian London's secrets, stepping beyond the known into the city's living, breathing memory. Every pulse of light, every ripple of water, every whisper in the fog told them the truth. Survival would require courage, trust, and understanding that went beyond reason. The glowing spiral intensified, tendrils of water reaching out toward them. The coat figure's voice, or what he assumed was its voice, resonated in their minds. Face what has been forgotten, or be forgotten yourself. Oliver and Eliza exchanged a glance. There was no hesitation, no turning back. Whatever lay ahead, whatever the river demanded, they would face it together. And in that moment, the river surged once more, enveloping them in light and mist. The watchers hissed and recoiled. The fog twisted violently. And Oliver knew, with a mix of terror and awe, that the climax of their journey, whether they survived or became part of the city's hidden stories, had finally begun. The next moments would decide everything. Oliver felt the river's pulse intensify around them, vibrating through his bones like a warning and a promise at the same time. The spiral of glowing water twisted higher, the tendrils of mist curling and reaching like living fingers, trying to push them back. Eliza's hand was tight in his, and for a moment, they stood frozen, caught between fear and determination. Then, with a shared breath, they stepped forward into the heart of the spiral. The water swirled violently, but the glowing path beneath their feet seemed to hold firm, guiding them toward the center. The watchers at the riverbank hissed and recoiled, unable to follow. Even the shadow in the coach shimmered uneasily, merging partially with the fog, but keeping its eyes fixed on Oliver and Eliza. As they reached the center, the massive glowing form beneath the water rose slowly, revealing itself fully. It was humanoid in shape, yet fluid, its body shifting like liquid silver, refracting light in impossible patterns. Its eyes opened, glowing with deep blue fire, and Oliver felt them pierce into his soul. There was no malice there, only ancient awareness, a memory of centuries, a consciousness older than the city itself. The pulse of the river synchronized with their own heartbeats. And in that moment, Oliver understood. This wasn't just a river or a spirit. It was the living memory of Victorian London, containing the stories of the lost, the vanished, and those forgotten by time. The lights, the fog, the watchers, they were all extensions of it, mechanisms to protect itself, to test those who sought its knowledge. A wave of understanding swept through him. It isn't here to kill us, he realized. It's here to judge whether we are worthy of knowing the city's secrets. Eliza whispered, her voice trembling but determined. What do we do? Oliver met her gaze. We listen. We follow its rhythm. The river pulsed, and suddenly the tendrils of water lifted, forming a protective barrier around them. The glowing spiral tightened, then opened, revealing a path of clear water leading to a small, sunken platform at the center. On it lay an old, weathered box, covered in moss and glowing faintly. This was the heart of the river's memory, the repository of the lost stories, the truths no one had ever survived to tell. Oliver stepped forward, reaching for the box. As his hands touched the wet wood, the glow flared, and the water's pulse surged into him, a rush of images, sounds, and whispers overwhelming his senses. He saw the streets of Victorian London centuries ago, markets crowded with people, alleyways teeming with life, secret societies, and hidden tragedies. He felt the despair and hope of every lost soul, every person who had followed the lights and never returned. Eliza stepped beside him, and the pulse entered her too. She gasped, seeing the stories in flashes. A young girl fleeing the fog, a street urchin lost to the river, a mother searching endlessly for her child. The river wasn't just memory. It was empathy, a record of suffering and resilience, a mirror of the city's soul. The watchers at the bank shrieked softly, their glow flickering as if resisting the pull of the river's truth. The shadow and the coach shivered, then finally dissolved into the fog, leaving Oliver and Eliza alone in the center, protected by the river's power. The water began to calm. The pulse softened, settling into a steady rhythm. The glowing spiral slowly dissipated, and the fog began to thin. The lost souls' faces faded from view, leaving only the serene blue glow of the river, which now seemed almost gentle. Oliver closed his eyes, feeling the weight lift from his chest. They had survived. They had passed the test. They had glimpsed the hidden truths of Victorian London and, in doing so, had earned the river's respect. Eliza exhaled, tears streaming down her cheeks. We made it. Oliver nodded, still feeling the residual pulse of the river in his veins. We did. But what now? Before either of them could speak, the river shifted suddenly, almost playfully. From beneath the water, a single glowing hand reached up, not toward them, but toward the box. It lifted the box carefully, almost ceremoniously, and opened it. Inside was a single, unassuming key, glowing softly in the dim light. Oliver took it, feeling warmth spread through his fingers. The river pulsed once more, as if approving. Then, without warning, the water surged, washing the box away, taking the glowing forms of the lost souls with it, leaving only silence and calm. Eliza looked around, disbelief in her eyes. "It's gone." "Not gone," Oliver said softly. "Just return to where it belongs. We have what we need." A faint ripple ran across the water, and then a whisper carried on the breeze. "Remember what you have seen. Protect it. Learn from it. And never follow the lights blindly again." They stepped out of the river, water dripping from their clothes, hearts still racing. The fog had lifted completely, leaving them in the quiet pre-dawn streets of Victorian London. The city looked ordinary again, but Oliver knew better. Beneath its cobblestones and winding alleys, the river's memories still lived, waiting, watching, remembering. As they turned to leave, a flicker in the alley caught Oliver's eye. A shadow moved quickly along the walls, darker than the dawn, and he realized with a jolt that not everything had ended. The watchers were gone, the river had calmed, but the city still had secrets. Eliza noticed it too. "Do you see that?" Oliver nodded slowly. "Yes, and I think it's watching us. But this time, we know its rules." They walked back toward the main streets, the key secure in Oliver's pocket, hearts pounding but minds clearer than before. The city was alive, yes, but now they carried part of its memory, its truth, and its warnings with them. And as the sun rose over Victorian London, casting golden light over the fog-tinged streets, Oliver felt a chill run down his spine. Not from fear, but from recognition. Somewhere in the shadows, just beyond the edge of sight, a new watcher moved, different from the rest, silent, patient, and waiting. The city had allowed them to survive, but it had not revealed everything. And Oliver knew, with a certainty that made his stomach twist, that their story, like the river's memory, was far from over. The secret of Victorian London was no longer just theirs to witness. It was theirs to guard. And somewhere, deep beneath the streets, something was awakening that would test them again in ways they could not yet imagine. The river had judged them. They had passed. But the city was alive, and its mysteries were endless. Oliver looked at Eliza, her eyes wide but steady. "Ready," she nodded. "Ready." And together, they stepped into the streets of a city that had just revealed its heart, but still hid the rest of its soul. The adventure was over, for now. But the watchers were never truly gone. The end, or perhaps the beginning. Oliver and Eliza walked slowly through the streets of Victorian London, their footsteps echoing softly over the cobblestones. The early morning sun filtered through the lingering mist, casting a gentle glow over the city that had been alive with secrets only hours before. The river had returned to its quiet, reflective state, and the city seemed almost ordinary. Yet both of them knew that nothing would ever feel ordinary again. Eliza's hand still rested in his, and Oliver felt the weight of their shared experience settle between them. They had faced the unknown together, survived the pulse of the river, and glimpsed centuries of hidden stories. The key in Oliver's pocket was a reminder, tangible proof that the city had entrusted them with something rare and sacred. He wondered what they were meant to do with it. "We did it," Eliza said softly, breaking the silence. "We really did it." Oliver nodded, letting out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Yes, but I think it's more than surviving. We've been given a responsibility. Those letters, the river, the watchers, they're part of something bigger. We're part of it now." Eliza's eyes wandered to the rooftops, the narrow alleys, and the fog that still curled faintly over the river. "Do you think there's more out there? Things we haven't seen?" He smiled faintly, a mixture of awe and caution. "I'm sure of it. The city's full of stories, some lost, some waiting to be discovered. But I also think we've learned how to respect them now. That's the difference." Their walk brought them past familiar landmarks. Market stalls where the vendors were already setting up for the morning, the faint scent of bread from bakeries, and the distant sound of church bells. The ordinary life of the city had resumed, yet Oliver felt its pulse beneath him, like a quiet heartbeat reminding him that the city remembered everything. The vanished, the lost, the forgotten, they were part of London still, woven into its streets, its fog, its very soul. They stopped by a small bridge overlooking the river. The water was calm, reflecting the morning light in soft ripples. Oliver took the key from his pocket and held it up, watching it catch the sunlight. Do you think we'll ever come back here? Eliza shook her head slowly. I don't know, but I think it doesn't matter. We carry the knowledge with us now, and that's what counts. We've seen the city's secrets, and we've survived them. That alone changes everything. Oliver nodded. He thought about the pale figure, the watchers, and the shadow in the coat. Each had played a role in their journey, testing, guiding, or challenging them. None of them had been enemies in the traditional sense. They were guardians, part of the city's living memory. Understanding that changed everything. Fear could no longer control him. He now felt respect, awe, and a sense of stewardship. Eliza leaned against the railing of the bridge, looking down at the water. You know, I used to think history was boring. Just stories in books, names and dates. But now, her voice trailed off as she glanced at Oliver. Now I understand. History is alive. It's not just in books. It's in the streets, in the rivers, in the people who came before us. And we're part of that story now. Oliver smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Exactly. We don't just learn history. We live it. And sometimes we survive it. They stood in silence for a moment, letting the city breathe around them. The fog had lifted completely, leaving the streets bright and clear. The river reflected the calm sky, and for the first time since they had entered the fog, Oliver felt peace. The tension of the past hours had eased, leaving a quiet, steady rhythm in its place. Eliza, he said finally, breaking the moment, I think we should write it down. Not everything, but some of it. So people understand, so they respect the city, its secrets, and the lives that have been part of it. She looked at him, nodding slowly. Yes, and maybe, by telling the story carefully, we can help others survive if they ever stumble across what we did. That knowledge, it's like a gift and a responsibility all at once. Oliver glanced back toward the river one last time, feeling the subtle pull of the currents beneath the surface. The city had tested them, challenged them, and finally accepted them. He understood now that survival wasn't just about escaping danger. It was about learning, understanding, and carrying forward the stories that had been hidden for centuries. They walked back into the heart of the city, the keys safe in Oliver's pocket, their minds alive with everything they had seen. The streets bustled with life, children running past them, vendors calling out their wares, and carriages rolling over the cobblestones. It all seemed ordinary, yet both knew that beneath the surface, the city had memory, awareness, and life that would continue long after they left. As they reached the outskirts of the city, a sudden gust of wind carried a whisper through the air. It was faint, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. Remember. Eliza shivered slightly, but Oliver squeezed her hand reassuringly. We will, I promise. She smiled faintly, her fear replaced by quiet determination. Then we're ready to move forward. Whatever comes next, we know what to respect and what to watch for. Oliver nodded. He realized that while the city had tested them, they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to the hidden threads of history than most could ever hope to be. The river, the fog, the watchers, all had been part of a living lesson, teaching them to see beyond the ordinary, to feel the pulse of history itself. As they left the river behind and walked toward the rising sun, the city stretched before them, vast, mysterious, and full of secrets. Oliver knew that one day they might return, but for now, they had learned what they needed. Knowledge, courage, and respect would guide them through whatever challenges awaited. And as they disappeared into the streets of Victorian London, one last ripple of fog drifted over the river, faint and fleeting, a reminder that the city's memory was always watching, always alive. The watchers might rest, the river might calm, but the pulse of history, the stories of the lost, and the lessons they carried would continue to shape the city and those brave enough to face its mysteries. Oliver and Eliza walked on, hearts steady, minds open, carrying the city's secrets, their experience, and the knowledge that history wasn't just something to read about. It was something to survive, understand, and respect. And with every step, they felt a quiet thrill, knowing they had not only survived Victorian London's hidden dangers, but had become part of its living memory, ready to face whatever mysteries history might hold next. The city had tested them, revealed its heart, and finally allowed them to carry its story forward. And somewhere, beneath the streets, the river's pulse continued, steady and eternal, waiting for the next seeker brave enough to learn its secrets. Oliver and Eliza's journey had ended, but the legacy of what they had seen and the respect they had earned would last forever.